Hey, everybody. Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. I'm John Martin.
And I'm Dean Riverman.
2020.
I mean...
Is there anything else to say about it?
No.
All right, show over. Thanks,
yeah,
everybody.
there you go.
No. All right, we do have to review the year. That's going to be our episode today. We're going to talk about 2020 review. We're going to talk about the things that obviously went very, very wrong in so many ways.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about some things that went right.
Okay,
though.
so I'm the ultimate optimist, I guess. So there's some good. There's always the silver lining on the cloud, right? There's got to be some good that comes out of 2020.
It's just a very, very big cloud this year.
It's a really huge cloud, yeah.
And you got to look real hard for that silver.
Hey.
So.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to do that. We're going to reflect on the pod. We're going to talk a little bit about next year, what comes next, maybe make some predictions.
There you go.
And as always, share some of our fun things from the year. So it's time for us to plug in and get connected.
Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. It's time to get connected.
All right, so again, 2020. I mean, right?
Right? 20. It seemed like such a. It had. I don't know. It was gonna be such a cool year.
Sure.
My daughter was graduating from high school and is like 2020. It was so cool to graduate 2020. You know, it's just
it is a nice
you
round
rang in the
number.
new year in the 2020, and it adds. It could have been cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that didn't.
Every year has that optimism to it, obviously. And next year we'll have some optimism. There's unfortunately some of the worst aspects of this year are still going to be lingering heading into 2021. We acknowledge that, but
not just 2021 and beyond.
Well, true. Yeah. But I also acknowledge that every time you get to a new year, there is always that sense of hope and renewal and let's start over again. And then midway through the year, you're like, this sucks too. Let's can't wait till 2022. But I did want for us to kind of reflect a little bit on this year and think about it. And even if there weren't a coronavirus, I'm sure there was going to be stuff. I mean, before the coronavirus hit, you remember there was fires in Australia. Half of Australia burned away. I mean,
you're right.
An awful start there. There was a lot of awful things happening. Yeah. Let's be honest, we were going to be in for a very contentious election year. Yeah. That was going to happen regardless.
That was coming, right?
We knew that was on the horizon. But nobody obviously expected a worldwide pandemic that has just changed the way we live our life.
Were there, I don't know, were there other signs? Are you into numerology? I mean, did we miss some stuff here? Were we not listening to the people that were saying 2020? Oh, you think it's going to be good? Oh, no.
I want those people who were always like predicting an end of the world. There's always some random date that's going to be the end of the world. And we always get to that date and everyone's a little on edge for that day a little bit. And then it passes and we're like, oh. And then those same people go, oh, never mind. We read the signs wrong. We actually meant this date 6 years from now. I didn't hear a single one of those damn people come out and talk about 2020. Did you?
I don't know, but I feel like I missed something. I feel like we all missed something. We should have, Nostradamus, somebody should have been out there saying March 11th, 2020 is the day the world's going to burn or whatever.
The Mayan calendar's already ended. We've already passed that. We've passed all those doomsday cults. Just no one, which just goes to show you that nothing's predictable. That's what
nothing's predictable. And I think that's the shock value that what happened in 2020 is that nobody saw it coming at all. Right. I mean, it's so interesting now to see hindsight. You see videos of President Bush and Dr. Fauci back in 2000 talking in front of the WHO about how we as a world need to have a better plan when the pandemic hits and stuff like that. And it's like, you could have just fast forward 20 years and we're in the, everything that they were talking about then, we should have done.
But isn't that human nature?
Yeah.
For us to
totally is.
I mean, not to get into, the politics of climate change or whatever you might believe about that. But again, one of those things where there's a lot of things that people say, all right, we know this is sort of a problem, but it's a future problem and it's not a right now problem. Right. So I don't really need to worry about it right now.
The house isn't burning right now, or is it? Don't know. But yeah, right. Why are we so reactionary?
I don't know. It's a huge problem with humanity in general, society in particular, maybe even American culture too. To just want to just shove problems off into the future as someone else's problem to deal with until it becomes our problem, and then suddenly we all, you're right, run around and go, how did this happen?
Well, all I know though, and again, me being the optimist, I know that if you have survived and you're going to survive the next however many 6 months or whatnot, I think we'll look back on it and be stronger for it. That's what I'm hoping for in a lot of ways.
And hopefully we learn some things. That's
right.
That's really to me. That's always the key. Is like, did you learn something from it? Because if 5 years from now another pandemic is running across this globe, I'm gonna be like, really, people, come on.
Yeah, we
really.
Yeah,
we didn't.
Well, apparently they happen a lot. There was the bird flu. There was, it's. I don't know. I was looking at some statistic. It's like almost every year there's not a pandemic, but a new
something
virus
that could turn into
yes,
one,
exactly.
If left to run unchecked.
So we're not out of the woods by any means. But yes, I hope we learn something through this through this particular pandemic. Holy moly! If we don't, what is all this worth?
I know, no doubt. So let's talk a little bit about. I feel like we talk a lot about what didn't go right, and maybe let's go ahead and finish the didn't go right stuff, so we can get on to some positive stuff after that.
Okay.
Let's just do all the bad crap right up at the top, so we can bum you out, but then enlighten you and hopefully make you feel a little better as we get through the latter part of the episode.
Okay.
So, and some of this stuff, I feel like we have talked about a lot of this as we've gone through the year of what's going wrong, where there's been problems. We talked like on our work from home episode about the struggles with that. We talked about managing during this time, marketing during a crisis. There's a lot of things that I think we discussed about this year that kind of didn't work well or that we struggled with. I think 3 that I came up with in particular were communication, which is, let's be honest, communication is a struggle in the best of situations, regardless of whether everybody's stuck at home and working separately and not able to see each other face to face every day. Information. And this is, again, something I think that some companies do better than others. Some, and some industries do better than others. And some just, I don't know, people in general do better than others. Spreading information, sharing information. Getting the right information out at the right time to the right people. And then events, and I'm kind of talking obviously a little bit about our world and the reseller channel. Events obviously was something that was, a big, huge deal in our world and something that we all expected, put money aside for. I know there's plenty of companies that, that I've talked to and people we've talked to that have said, hey, we had a lot, banked on being able to go to X show, like I remember when this whole thing started was right around the time that HIMSS was going to launch. And that's a huge show.
Oh, man.
For anybody that works in healthcare. It's
big time.
The big show of the entire year. And a lot of people felt very frustrated by hey, I can't roll out my brand new products here. Maybe I was going to do something that just doesn't even make sense post-pandemic anymore. So there's a lot I think that obviously was missing when people couldn't get together and meet the way they used to.
Yeah.
What about you? What are some things you think that kind of didn't work this year?
I would put education at the top, and I've got kids obviously in various forms of the education process from college all the way down to grade school, and the whole pivot to stay at home is really a struggle on the education part. I mean, what didn't go right, it's still not going right. Right. For those unfortunately that have to be at home. I mean, it's just created such a burden, and at the end of the road, the vast majority of it's just simply not getting done. So now we're going to have the consequences of that to face in years coming up. But educating parents aren't teachers. I mean, they're not educated.
And even if they are, they still weren't prepared for that.
Right? Yeah. I mean, that's just one of those that's again, it's impacting me in my life, but it's just crazy to think about how that. That pivot just is not working out really well now.
It's one of those things. I'm glad that my son is only 3, and granted that comes with its own challenges because when we were all stuck at home when his daycare was closed, and currently is again for a brief time. Hopefully brief, but given the current situation, could be a lot longer. So obviously, I had to learn how to entertain a toddler while trying to work a 40-hour week job from home as well. Not easy. But then, if you have that extra layer on of having to, to teach them, get them in a structured environment that's different from school, because we all know how kids are. Like, I've already learned this about my kid. When he's with other people, he's a saint.
Much better.
When he's with us, he's a nightmare sometimes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the way it goes.
I'm sure it's exactly how it is for school-age children, too. That, whereas maybe they go to school and they're a perfect student and they do everything well, suddenly at home they can't keep it straight. They can't focus for a couple hours at a time, have no interest in sitting down and doing the work. So kudos to parents like you that have to to manage that piece too.
Right. I mean, it's a burden on the family, right? I mean, and mothers, are taking a little bit more of the brunt on that. I was looking at some statistics today, and it is, the moms are the ones that statistically are staying home more than the guys are. Just the burden's a little bit heavier there, just because moms. I mean, it is what it is in our current society. So yeah, when you think about what's not going right, that's one of them. I would put communication up there as well as you did. It's very tough. I mean, it's tough to pivot, and I don't know. I guess some generations, and we talked about this, are having a harder time with that than other generations. I mean, the younger generation, they live in Snapchat and these types of, I mean, they're always on their phone, and so isolated in a closet, still communicating with their friends, not as big as of an issue than people that have been used to engaging with folks and communicating in a completely different way all their lives, not just work, but socially and things like that too. So communication has really been a challenge, I think, and it's difficult. I don't know that it's going right in a lot I'm 2020 because
I mean, even for as much as we've figured out so far, there's still always challenges with that.
Always.
I mean, I think I'm sure some businesses and companies have tackled it better than others, and made that pivot a little bit quicker. But I'm sure plenty of our customers and and viewers are still struggling with hey, my job is built around social. Connections is built around going to those events, is built around being able to pick up a phone and talk to somebody anytime. And not just picking up the phone, but then also being able to go visit them in person and see what they're dealing with. And now, when you're limited to just the phone, or limited to communicating by email, or trying to pivot to some kind of marketing discussion, like it can't be easy, and it can't. I think for some businesses, it's going to be very difficult to make that sustainable if they still have made it this far. Hopefully, you made it this far. You get it, and you kind of know what you're doing, and maybe you're going to be able to keep at that for as much longer as we have to. But I imagine there's still a lot of people that are struggling right now.
I couldn't agree more. Another thing that didn't really work is no sports. When this thing first hit, and not being able to have some type of sports
right
as
at the
a
beginning
release
of the baseball
valve,
season too, like just the spring training was
near
wrapping
and dear
up,
to our heart, your heart more.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, that was just such a killer. Not having was it 2-3 months we went, and
it was
nothing
other than those marble runs.
Which were awesome.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, like,
God, that seems like 5 years ago.
The flip side of that, if you're going to look at some of that silver lining of positivity there, is that when it came back, everything came back at the same time. Like, if you were I'm mostly a baseball guy and a little bit of football. But man, if you're into a lot of different sports and you just love any kind of sport, there was a point there where you had baseball, football, basketball playoffs, and not just
NHL all at the same time.
Not
Literally
just regular season stuff either. Like, you had the heart of playoffs for a bunch of different leagues, and the most exciting parts of the year for a lot of different sports. I mean, I guess that was worth waiting for, I hope.
Well, I don't know. All the UFC fans, by the way, are laughing right now because that went the entire time. That didn't stop.
No, it didn't.
Or
wrestling. I think we talked about this at one point. Like, I remember I don't watch wrestling, but it's one of those things. It's on 70 channels, so if you happen to be channel surfing, you find it from time to time. And I just remember one day coming across an episode of, don't ask me which one because I don't know the difference between any of them. And it's just the empty arena. They're in this empty arena, and you got these guys coming out here flexing, where normally the crowd is just going wild. It's just and some loud music, and just wasn't the same.
No, it's not working.
Your little pseudo faux sport here doesn't quite look the same when people are up there screaming, yelling at you the whole time. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that was a problem in other sports too. Let's be honest. So.
Yeah. But it's been good to see it come back, and not just in the professional level, but I think all the way down to the high school level. It has a lot of meaning, and so they're doing some football and stuff like that here locally, and nobody can go to the games except for the parents, which is a good move, and they're scattered in the stands. So I mean, it just that brings a lot of community. It brings some amount of normality back to our lives, a little bit with a risk, yes, but oh my gosh. What's not working is this constantly weighing risks and rewards. I mean, just the anxiety of everybody having to sit here and weigh these not little decisions, big decisions about, do I go see my elderly parent? Do I, what? Oh my God, it's just endless.
I know
at this point in time.
Well,
that's really fatiguing.
It is, and I felt like we all kind of reached a point where we learned to grapple with it, and when that curve kind of took that rolled downward a little bit, and things started easing up a bit, stuff reopened, which. Granted, you can debate whether that was appropriate timing or whether we did stuff too early or not or whatever. But, there was at least a sense, I think a lot of people felt a little bit more at ease for a bit. And
I think we had a better understanding of the virus.
We understood it. We understood what we needed to do.
We didn't know.
Right.
We didn't know if I get it, am I going to die? We know so much more about the virus now. 7-8 months into it that we're at today. But right when it hit, we had no clue.
Right. But then, the flip side of that is we're recording this in mid-November.
Right.
Just a heads up. It's not really the end of the year for us, but we're doing this a little bit early. So obviously, one, a lot of stuff could happen over the next month and a half.
Right.
But two, we're also in the place where cases are starting to rise again.
Sure.
It's becoming more of an issue than ever.
Yep.
It's quite possible, a lot of places, it's already starting to happen. Places are starting to lock back down again.
Yep.
Businesses are starting to be closed up
Yep.
again.
Yep.
Could be a lot more of that in our future, So again, that anxiety level starting to rise back
sure.
up.
Yeah.
Even though I think we have a better idea of how to manage it, we're still again at that point where we're starting to go, I don't know how comfortable I feel anymore,
Yeah,
So.
it hasn't left. The anxiety has not left this year. So I don't, and then part of the things, and when you think about the long term, I was reading an article that said, and I'll come back to this as well, there's a significant tail of mental health needs that'll come out of this. So it's not, this isn't something that, if the vaccine does come out in springtime and great and everybody gets it, or those who want, blah, 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 there's even an issue there. There's still going to be a significant tail. I mean, this has been such a traumatic type of a thing that we'll be dealing with this for, I don't know, decades.
I mean,
probably,
I don't know about you, but if I'm out in public and someone's hacking up a lung, I'm going to be still weird about it. I don't care how many vaccines you've given me at that point. I'm still, because I was that way before. And I know we talk about the John the germaphobe.
Right, John
and I'm
the
really
germaphobe.
not that bad, but it's a simple thing of I think people are going to be much more, conscious and aware of that now, and aware of, how illness spreads, and aware that if someone's sick and they are coughing in your vicinity, or, they're
not
sneezing
cool.
all around you, and when you're tightly packed together with a bunch of other people, there's a risk of stuff spreading, whether it is a pandemic of a virus we don't understand, or just a common cold or a basic flu or something, there's a lot of, I think people are going to be still very hesitant and very, hopefully, because that is not a bad thing to be concerned about, spreading illness,
Sure.
How many times have you had to work with that person that shows up to work no matter how sick they are, sits there at their desk all day,
Yeah.
I'm okay, I'm fine. I got my tea.
I'm just getting out of it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm almost, and you're like, no, go away, go home.
That's going to happen for quite a few years. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see.
I think the shaming of that might be a little more pronounced than it was before.
Well, I think, and rightfully so. People will be like, hey, dude, just go home.
Right.
You can work from home.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
There you
okay.
go. That's the other part there, yeah.
That whole work from home thing that has really kind of revolutionized where we're at right now.
Yeah, definitely.
Not only that use case that you gave, but being on a plane. Can you imagine being on a plane sitting next to somebody who's hacking? That has happened to me countless times. I don't know how many times that somebody in the vicinity of where I'm sitting has some kind of illness. This is prior to COVID, obviously. And, you're just sitting there saying, well, there's at least a 50-50 chance I'm going to get whatever that person has. And I just hope it's not the plague.
Right.
And that's how you would joke to yourself pre-pandemic. Now it's going to have a little bit of a different connotation.
Exactly. If they told me that I had to still have a mask up just to take flights, just in general, long after this is over with, I'd probably be like, okay,
yeah,
I get it. That's fine.
That's fine. Yeah,
I'm okay with that. Oh man.
Anyway,
okay. Well,
so a lot has gone wrong.
Yes. So let's shift to some of the good stuff, though. Like I say, we got all the dark, terrible stuff out of the way. Let's shift to some of the stuff I think that has worked really well.
Fair enough.
I think I want to start first of all because you kind of talked a little bit when you're talking about the sports thing of people coming back together.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that idea that let's be honest, we live in a very divisive world for a multitude of reasons right now. But I will say, especially in the early days of this, there was a lot of communal spirit that was going on that I found very refreshing. Hopefully it's still out there. Like I said, I feel like, it got a little shaken up as time went on and people just got tired of dealing with this. But early on, you had so many people that were trying so hard to do good things for each other, for their neighbors. You'd see people putting up signs in their windows just for, kids walking by or whatever to see fun, cool stuff, as they were walking around the neighborhood or something. My neighborhood was having, children were painting rocks and leaving them random places around the neighborhood, which I know is a thing regardless of this, but it was something that people got excited about and were sharing images on Facebook. The love and support that went out for our frontline workers, for people in healthcare, for our essential workers. There was a very strong communal spirit that was really built up there for a while, as everybody genuinely felt for a while we're in this together. Unfortunately, I feel like that did kind of fall apart, but we won't talk about that negative part of it. But I will say that I was very encouraged to see that at a time of a lot of need and when a lot of people were very concerned about their health, their lives, their jobs, their families, you saw a lot of people really came together and kind of, bonded at this time.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think there was an initial push of that, if you will, that kindness. And we talked about, and I would share with the team some of the acts of kindness that came across me personally in our world, where my daughter, Tori, struck up a letter conversation with our mail carrier, which was really awesome. I mean, it's like everybody's locked indoors, and how do you communicate? And she just started up a little thing with our mail carrier. It was the cutest thing ever, but it was awesome. It was one of those acts of kindness that kind of gave you hope during that point in time. Even then, a little bit after that, my other daughter graduated from high school, and she had people coming over and giving her care because, they weren't doing a graduation. They weren't getting the experience of prom. They weren't getting all those things that you get out of your senior year. So you had just people randomly coming over, doing acts of kindness, and delivering, cards and gift baskets, just trying to raise the spirit of those people. And you know what, though, John? I mean, I think at the end of the road, that's where most people are.
I agree.
And
we're just not the vocal ones.
Well, and I think we need to be cognizant of that, and then also cognizant of the fact that it's usually the extremes of a conversation that get the megaphone.
Yes.
And that a lot of that's going on right now. But to me, I treat that as noise. I think most people, they'll listen to it a little bit. What are you talking about? Okay. But at the end of the road, most people, this is just me, my thought, are good in nature and want good things as a result of some of the things, and some of the things that need to happen, that we can all agree on as a society. So I'm hoping that some of that rhetoric and some of that fringe noise kind of dies down here after the beginning of the year, and we can get back to just being human and that kind of a thing. We'll see.
I concur. Yeah. Well, innovation's the other thing I think I wanted to talk about, and this is something obviously this podcast has been all along the way, when we're always sharing our tech connecting with us or what's going on even with our vendors and software partners that have been on the show with us. This spirit of innovation, and I've said it before, and we'll repeat it one last time hopefully this year, which is necessity is the mother of invention kind of thing. And the necessity of this year was more profound and more urgent and more dire than usual. But there is a lot of amazing technology, a lot of amazing thought processes, innovative practices, ideas that have come out of this that will last us, for a long time to come, and will be beneficial for a long time to come. So I'm always, that's the one side of things where I always have to look and say, hey, as bad as things got, ideally 2 or 3 years down the road, we'll be able to say this would never have been a thing. If it weren't for that pandemic. As awful as that was, and as terrible as it is, and unfortunate, the loss of life that's occurred, this came out of it, and that's a positive that maybe helps save other lives down the road or something, or improves the way we live or the way we work in the future. So I'm very encouraged by, the innovation that comes out of stuff like this. There's a lot of great people and companies out there that when something like this happens, their mind instantly shifts into, how can I help? How can I make this better? How can I improve the world from here on out? After seeing what I've seen here. Yeah,
it's truly amazing to see the human spirit in action. There's just no doubt about it, whether it's from delivery of food to, innovative technology that's trying to enable people and businesses to continue on. That's one thing I love about being in the society that we're in, that enables innovation and embraces that and has that a part of it. I mean, I can't even fathom being in a type of society that's not that, that doesn't allow people to innovate and come up with ideas about how to make life better even during these times.
Right.
It's truly inspiring to see. And there's been a lot of good, I think, that has come out of that. As well. Yeah.
Well, then let's kind of talk a little bit about the channel itself, and in our world, in BlueStar world here a little bit, and what went right. I'm going to start off by talking about this podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, we were going to do this regardless, and we've told this to some of our guests, and if you're viewers on the YouTube channel, and if you're not, if you've never watched it on YouTube, we're sitting in a very nice studio. Mm-hmm. We've got 2 extra chairs here with 2 extra microphones. Mm-hmm. We've got a really nice setup. Like, this place was designed to have guests in here sitting down with us and doing a podcast.
Having a conversation. That's right.
And obviously that changed dramatically. Like, I think we've had a couple of our, fellow BlueStar folks, able to come in. Yeah. But other than that, everybody's been remote. And, it turns out that pivot worked very well. We figured it out. I feel like we've had a very successful podcast, in spite of that particular hurdle that we jumped. But, just to that end, though, I've had a lot of fun doing this podcast, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But I think it's a testament to, the work, that you and I have put into this, and some other folks that I'm going to shout out here in a little bit too, to make this happen and to actually put this on every week and be something that hopefully, some of our listeners, have taken some comfort in or enjoyed listening to, or, learned something useful from, throughout this crazy year, because the way this turned out was not part of the plan. Like, I'm glad we still did it. I'm glad we didn't shift away from it, but it was not how it was supposed to go.
Well, it's important. It's one of the value adds that we feel that BlueStar brings to the table is education, and having this medium, a podcast, to be able to do that is very important. We didn't know how important it would be, when we first had the idea about this time last year is when it started percolating. Oh, maybe we should do a podcast. What do you mean do a podcast? Yeah, and we did all the analysis around it, and it's an important way to communicate. It doesn't communicate with everybody because certain people like podcasts, myself being one of them. But it's really important way to communicate to people. And I've enjoyed it thoroughly. And I took a look back at some of the things that we've done. We've done a lot, brother.
Oh yeah, we've covered a lot of topics,
a lot of different topics, and brought a lot of education, I think, to the marketplace. In a lot of these episodes, they got a lot of legs, as we say. Yep. So you can go back and listen to them. You don't have to listen to it sequentially. There's good 101 stuff in there, from digital signage to cloud-based software. Man, we did a lot. We covered a lot of ground.
But you're right. I do feel like I know, there's a lot of episodes where we talk about COVID at some point in the current situation.
Sure.
But I still feel like there's a lot of stuff we talk about that if you ignore that particular section of it and ignore that part of the conversation, you're right. There's a lot of evergreen material that I think people could easily listen to years from now and still get some benefits out of. And if for some reason it does get stale, well, then we'll record something new that kind of takes its place and takes it to the next level there. So, but yeah, I've been excited about that. It's funny. I remember when I first interviewed at BlueStar, going on 3 years ago now, 3+ years ago, you interviewed me, I think the second time I came in, and told me at some point, briefly told me about the fact that you guys had a podcast, or were trying to do a podcast at the time, or tried to at some point. And I remember my ears perking up literally and being like, "Oh, that's something I'd be interested in." Yeah. And then I got hired on, and we really didn't do anything with it for a couple of years.
The bait and switch?
I came in, and I'm just like, I was promised a podcast. And it didn't happen. But then I remember as we were starting to enter into this year, and I was pitching hard on it. Like, look, I want to do this. Right. If we're going to do this, I want to be involved.
Yep.
And and when we finally got around to doing it, you were more than happy to let me get on board. So I thank you for that. I appreciate being part of this. I would have been sitting home with tears in my eyes if someone else was sitting here doing this every week. I'd be like, oh man, I want to do a podcast. So I do appreciate that. Let's see. A couple other things. Work from home. We had a whole podcast with this, so we don't need to elaborate. But I do feel like, I think the bottom line is still what I've always said about this, which is a lot of companies were able to pivot to that and realize it is not the disaster that they might have worried that it was going to be.
Yeah,
I think it's been a much more productive and great way to keep people working without any concerns about their health or exposing them to anything. And I would challenge that there are probably very few employers out there that are doing this that can honestly say that it's not going well for them, that it's a huge problem.
Oh, they're out there.
I'm sure there are.
They're out there, yeah.
There are always going to be people that are going to complain about that.
Right.
But I think in general, I think a lot of people who probably were like, oh, this is going to be a disaster, realized, oh, no. Like, people do want to work. They do want to do their jobs. They are responsible.
Yep.
And they're going to do their jobs from home.
It's just different. And change is always a disruptor.
It's
right?
true, yes.
So, and that was where we were at in March and April and May. And I mean, when you look at the statistics of how many people pivoted to, and again, these are mostly white-collar workers who pivoted to an at-home environment, it's just amazing. And we talked about how, when you, in hindsight, you think about it, I'm surprised the internet didn't crash with everybody now doing Zoom calls and all the bandwidth that we're absorbing, and the fact that, people were able to, their phone used to ring at their desk. Well, now you got to transfer that over either onto your computer or onto your cell phone. I mean, just, it's just a lot of, I get just a lot of pressure testing on some technology that was around, but yeah, it worked. And the work from home thing, it's still got some issues. Not everybody, and we've had on our staff, not everybody it does well in a work from home,
which is
home
understandable.
environment.
Yeah.
But it's just a new thing, right?
Yeah.
And it's a little bit of a change, and so we've adopted to the change, and we think that obviously, I think some people will start coming back at some point in time in 2021. So it'll be I think it's intuitive to think that at least for the next 5-10 years, if I had to bet, there's going to be a hybrid. Right. I don't know if we ever go back to, full up.
Right.
Everybody's going to work at a place every single day.
I mean, if you don't have to, why would you?
Yeah.
Where's the benefit if you don't have to? If people can function just as well at home. And what I think is funny, what we were just talking about, is that a lot of the stress of the whole work from home shift didn't end up falling on the business as much as I think we thought it was going to. Because like you said, we were all worried about, will the technology work? Will we be able to pivot? Will we get what we need to get in order for people to communicate and still do their job the same way? And, for us, there was a learning curve, but I think we all figured it out. Really, where the stress ended up happening is, and this is strictly because of the pandemic, where people were going to work from home in situations that were less than ideal. If your children were running around, if your spouse was also working from home and you didn't have the space for both of you to set up, like that's a whole different story than just, in a normal time frame, in a normal setting where you can say, hey, you're allowed to work from home if you want to. Your children aren't going to be there screaming at you all day long or demanding to watch something on TV, or you're trying to teach them or get them to do their homework. Your spouse isn't going to be with you fighting over who gets to use the office and who has to sit, at a table in the bedroom or something. Ideally, it's not going to be that way.
Right.
So I think, I think that's been the real stress test, has been more on the worker themselves trying to figure it out. How do I make this happen for myself?
Oh, yeah.
And not necessarily I never felt like I had any particular issues with the technology side of things. All right, take my computer home, connect to the VPN. We've got Teams now. We can do Zooms. Okay, we're good.
Yeah.
That stuff was easy. But, it was the part where my
the rest of
toddler
your
is
life.
running around me and saying, Daddy, every 5 minutes, wants something else to watch. Daddy, I want something to eat. That was where the challenge really lied there.
Yeah. So let's riff on this concept then, because I think with every good, I guess, work from home, there's going to be potentially some negatives that come out of it. So as I think about, the future and how people are going to be working, we've talked about also the gig economy and the fact that a lot of that is creeping into everyday life, not just Uber drivers and DoorDashers, but genuine professionals. Right. So do you see a world where, since we have a lot of people working from home now, even those people become gig workers, even at the professional level, even at a place like BlueStar or an accounting firm or a legal firm or whatever? I guess what I'm thinking of is employers now will ramp up employees via a gig economy as they need, as things. So there's a little bit of a downside there in the sense that, I go to work for a company, I go in every day, I have work to do, and that's, gone are the days, I guess, where you would work at the same company for 30, 40 years, the generation before us, but still some comfort in being an employee. I think that employees need to be worried or need to be cognizant of the fact that a gig economy is real and what that would mean to their lives. A lot of people maybe aren't comfortable with gigs. I'm going to be in this role, in this position. So, you might have employers say, well, I need a bookkeeper for 6 months.
Right.
And then, okay, that's my gig for 6 months. And then you're done. Your contract is over. Right. You're done with that. What do you think about the prevalence of more gig workers coming out of a work from home environment. Do you see where I'm going with
that?
Yeah,
I do, and you're right. And I can see the flaws of it, and I can also see some positives. I think if from the flaws side, it's kind of exactly what you laid out. The idea that there are some people that are never going to be comfortable with the idea of not having a steady job.
Right.
I know where I'm working a year from now, as long as I don't screw up,
I
or something goes wrong with the company.
Business seems to be good.
Right.
I can reasonably expect that I'm going to be employed next year.
Right. Versus, oh man, I may have a job for, like you said, a couple weeks, a few months, and then suddenly need something new.
Yeah.
I guess it's going to depend a lot on if that gig economy becomes strong enough that most people feel comfortable that there's always going to be a new gig around the bend for them.
Yeah, true.
And I think of like we're using some freelance designers and copywriters right now.
Sure.
Some of it's work I would prefer to be doing, but I'm doing a podcast. I love writing. We've talked about this before, and I initially kind of started winding my way into where I'm at now by doing a lot of writing projects for us for some of our ebooks. Yep. And I've reached a point where I don't have quite the time, or volume for that as much as I could. So we've been farming that out to some freelancers. And, we're keeping them busy. We're keeping them busy with steady work. But you're right. If suddenly that shifted, if in the next year or two we decided, hey, content marketing is not where it's at anymore. I hope not, because I literally changed my title to focus on content marketing. Yeah. So, but if for some reason that happened, does someone like that, what happens to them? Is it something like, I can't imagine that, if you're a designer, if you understand the ins and outs of working through Adobe and creating design projects, ebooks, websites, whatever, I can't imagine you're ever going to reach a point where someone doesn't need your services anymore.
No, it's not the not needing of the services. I think you touched on it. It's
just the uncertainty of
just
the job.
The uncertainty
right.
and the amount of anxiety I think that's going to bring to people's lives, right. and the reality of that, and because it's different. It right. is. I just think it's different, and I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know. I am not classically trained in any of that stuff, but I know human nature and the way I feel, there's a certain amount of comfort that comes from that. So if we're going into a world where that's up for grabs with some frequency, I think it adds another layer of anxiety to a world that may have already been kind of being stress test before this hit.
Right.
And the stress test was coming into, if you're a parent of younger kids and trying to juggle all those things, work, home, sports, and all these. I mean, we lead very demanding, anxious lives to begin with. Now right. you throw in the fact that, you might not be employed, or because anything can be gigged. Right. We need to get sales up. Let's hire some remote sales workers for 6 months
right.
and see if we can get sales up. And if it works, great. Okay. And maybe they'll stick around. Maybe they won't. Don't know.
Right.
It's a different world. And I don't know. It'll be very interesting to see where this goes, where the whole thing goes. And I don't know if that's a part of the. We've clearly as a society answered the question, yes, people can work from home. Not everybody, blah, 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 but you can.
Right.
Okay, now what?
Right.
What impact does that have moving forward? Yeah. It'll be interesting to see.
I think also where maybe my, concern lies too is do we need to be rethinking? And I feel like these conversations are happening. I know there's been some talk about what's going on with Uber, in California, with how the gig workers are treated and whether, they are considered as employees or not, and do they then qualify for health care or for whatever benefits, or 401k plans, stuff like that, even though they're, still considered a gig worker of sorts where, you're still working steadily for a company technically, but you are also, working in a situation where your income and your volume of work can flow up and down depending on need at the time, depending on, demand. So I'm curious, does that mean that we maybe have to start having a conversation around how we're paying gig workers? Is there going to be a template? Is there going to be some kind of, are you going to see more companies like the Ubers of the world and in the design world, like Fiverr or whatever, that are designed to gather people together in this gig world and help farm them out and help you connect, businesses connect to people? Or is it something where people are going to be able to start doing it more on their own?
We're trying to figure it out as a society.
Because I think that's the huge problem right now.
Here's my telltale sign that we are trying to figure this out as a society. I'm going to give you a couple use cases. Okay. So my kids, so the gig economy is definitely working, I think, for, I'm going to say 25-year-olds and younger. It is very much in their acceptability that they just hop on DoorDash. I mean, so my daughter, who's 18, with a couple of her friends. One of her friends, a DoorDasher. They had a great time the other night just running around DoorDashing. Right. And so it's 3 girls in a car, just driving around Cincinnati.
I would have done that when I was a kid, that young. I know I would. I would have thought it was awesome.
They're listening to music. They're chatting. Yep. One girl runs into whatever, Applebee's, grabs the food, DoorDashes it, and then they were just had a blast for like 2 hours. They made money. Right. And they're like just tickled pink about the whole thing. So you have now a generation of people that are used to that. And so maybe the gig economy is going to be okay there. Whereas people in my generation and older, gig economy? No, I need a job. Yeah, I can't.
Well,
I'm not just going to log in.
Depend on your home situation.
It is. But let me give you my other use case, because this just happened to us yesterday, and here's why our society is still trying to figure out this gig economy. So we did, for I think the 3rd time, we ordered groceries but had them delivered. My wife works too. And so, anyway, I've been trying to convince her for months now, honey, just, to have it delivered, can you do it? So we had it delivered yesterday, and the person who delivered our food, it was a woman, a little bit older than us, delivered our food in a Porsche. Like a Porsche SUV. And it's like, and so I get home and Patty is like, she's like, you'll never guess who delivered our groceries. I'm like, yeah, what? A woman in a Porsche. And I'm like, what? A woman in a Porsche? That's not exactly what so why I don't know. There's my use case. I don't know what to do with that.
Right.
But we got people that are driving $80,000 cars doing grocery delivers. Is that?
Well, yeah, exactly. What does that mean?
Something's out of whack. We're still trying to figure that out. I don't know what her situation is. If she's a stay-at-home mom and just looking for some extra cash, needed to get out of the house. Who knows? But what it tells me is
I can afford my Porsche, but I don't have the extra cash.
We haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah, that's just it. Because you're right. It's something that is going to depend on your age, your comfort, your home situation. I mean. Like, my wife and I have talked about this. Like, she said, hey, if I made enough money, I'd be happy to let you quit your job, your regular job, and like just focus on writing, freelance, start a podcast of your own or whatever it is you want to do.
Right.
But that's, wish fulfillment, it's, and it would require her to get to a certain level of income in her job, and then also there's the thing of like, do I ask her to be the one to do that? Should I be the one to do it and let her do her thing, because, I think most, a household where there are, parents and children, most of them are not going to be able to stop and think to themselves, hey, can we both become gig workers and just hope we have a steady stream of money to pay all the bills and keep our kids fed?
I don't know, but maybe that's a part of our current mindset. Right. I don't know. It's going to be fascinating.
I'm not saying that shouldn't happen. Like maybe that's the point. Maybe like we should be able to get to that point, but you've got to somewhere along the way then either make people feel like they can comfortably get new gigs regularly.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
That they'll be paid enough for doing so, and then they'll also have access to healthcare, savings plans, the perks that you get for being, employed with a steady employment with an employer too.
Yeah.
So a lot of questions to solve.
Yeah. Sorry for the sidebar there, but it was just rolling around in my head when I thought about the whole work from home. It'll be really intriguing to see how this manifests itself in our society in 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years.
I agree. Yeah, this is something I feel like we could easily revisit like a decade from now.
Oh yeah.
And be like, so here's what we were wondering about, and here's what's happened since. And I have a feeling that a lot of it we weren't necessarily expecting or were surprised by that happened. So.
Well, and on that note, because I know in the show notes here we were reflecting on the pod. It'll be funny, and we will. We should just make it a note to go back in 10 years and listen to this podcast, because I went back and listened to like our first podcast, even on this one, which was just a shocking 8 months ago or whatnot. It's funny. I mean, even some of the stuff that we were talking about then, right when the pandemic was hitting, it's really, I'm one of those people that likes to go back and look at things like that.
I think that would be kind of fun. Well, then let's shift over and reflect a little bit on the pod. And I think first and foremost, I want to give a shout out to some of the people that have made this pod happen.
Absolutely.
Our viewers, our listeners are used to you and me. They know we're part of this.
Now, can I set the stage here real quick before you start giving shout outs? We had no idea what we were doing this time last year. I mean, nobody in our staff knew how to put on a podcast, what the technical aspects were around it. We knew we had some great people on staff, but we didn't have this that we have or anything like that.
It's not like we went out and hired people like that knew how to do a podcast.
Well, that's the BlueStar way. We didn't bring in an expert. We just leaned on each other, which is the good news here. The team effort that it has taken to pull this off.
Well, and I think, here's the thing. I think a big part of it is you and I are both podcast listeners. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm a podcast fanatic. I'm always listening to podcasts. I love them. So it made sense to me to be like, all right, I love podcasts. I've always wanted to do a podcast anyway, for as long as I've been listening to them, for the couple of years that, the few years that podcasts have been like really a thing.
Yeah, right.
But like, I think there was also the fact that like we were both excited about doing this. We were passionate about doing it. Mm-hmm. We had ideas in mind. We knew what we wanted to do. And then you're right. And then we went out and grabbed some people from our staff and said, hey, can you help us make this happen? So first I want to give a shout out to Mark Ryan, our producer. You've heard him on a couple episodes recently.
Extraordinaire, yes.
He is the man that is always in the background, off screen. We know if you're watching the video and you see us staring at you, behind that video is a guy who is running the boards, who listens to all of our flubs, fixes stuff, makes edits, does whatever we ask him to do. Like he's been on top of it, so I very much appreciate him.
But podcast producer was not on his title.
It was not
this time last
year. It is now.
It is now.
Update your resume, Marco.
He's done a fantastic job.
You're not allowed to look for another job. But I'm just saying, put that out there as a skill on your, as a perk for yourself there.
He's a good one.
So I got to definitely give credit to him. Sam Claney, our staff writer, she popped up on our Pop Culture Tech episode.
Researcher.
Yeah. Who, she does great research for us. She's that person that whenever we, I've got a topic like, hey, I need some just random articles and stuff about this that we can talk about and I can do some research from rather than have the time to go out to do it myself.
And you know what's cool about that?
She comes back for it.
She loves research.
Oh, yeah.
She's like, oh, yeah, give me something. It's like a little, like a hungry dog. You know? Oh, you got something for me to research? Good. Let's go.
Exactly.
She comes back with awesome stuff.
Gives us great stuff. Yeah. And she's our social media guru, too. So, if you've ever come across a post about one of our podcasts on LinkedIn, that is her, on the BlueStar
She's chatting
LinkedIn.
It up. Yep. Mm-hmm.
She gets that information out there ready to tell people about it. So thank you, Sam. We appreciate your effort. Yep. James Cordy, I want to talk about him briefly, even though he hasn't been quite as part of much of the podcast on a regular basis now. At the very beginning, he was one of the of the original crew that helped us kind of map out what the show was going to look like, helped us create some of our original branding and logos, made some recommendations about, just kind of like what this should feel like from a digital marketing perspective.
Yep.
And he's, been on the show 3 or 4 times and helped us out with some episodes. And he's been that person we could turn to in a pinch if we needed a guest and bring him in here.
We all lean on Cordy.
We do, yes, very much so.
I mean, luckily, he has broad shoulders. So that
he's
we can
one of the unsung heroes of this company in so many ways.
100%.
People don't know, And then, of course, all of our guests and our sponsors. Our sponsors: Elo, Epson, Honeywell, Zebra, Star.
Yep.
At the beginning of the year, we went out to our vendors and said, "Hey, we're putting on a podcast. Who wants to help us out with this?"
You guys are doing what?
Yeah. And I'm sure some of them probably were like, really? We're like, well, you can have a couple guests on. We'll talk about some stuff. And they probably still were like, what? Yeah. Hopefully they're not going that. Hopefully not saying that anymore. Hopefully they're not at this point in the year going, why did we spend money on this? Like, why did we help BlueStar out with this and lend our people to help out with this? But, I hopefully you think it was beneficial. We definitely appreciate your assistance. We appreciate all of the amazing people that work for you that have come on the show.
Yep.
All of our other
lent
guests
their
from
expertise.
Yeah, exactly. All of our other guests from the world of software, resellers, just smart people. Dean and I, we're relatively intelligent, but there's a lot of stuff that we acknowledge we don't know anything about.
Absolutely.
So we have to bring these guests in here to help us understand that. Yeah. We very much appreciate it.
And we're building. I think when you look into 2021, we'll be building on that. We're going to be leaning on more subject matter experts that come out of our sponsors and their ecosystems. It's just critical for all of us. So it's good news that's happening. Right. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, what have we learned from doing a podcast, and what do we recommend for anybody else that maybe? I've actually had a couple of people reach out to me and say, "Hey, I'm starting a podcast. What do you guys, what do you guys recommend?" I'm like, seriously, I've only been doing this for like 8 months. Do you think I'm an expert? Like, it may look like it. Maybe I guess we come off looking like we're professionals, but it's been fly by the seat of our pants at times. At least in the early days, it certainly was. I think now we've got a formula for it. So I think for me, like I've learned a lot about how to. Kind of like how to manage the process. And I think we've got into a good place now where it is very easy to, when we know there's an episode come up, and like, all right, here's what I need. This is the research needs to be done. I need to get together a cue sheet of some topics. I need to reach out to this person, schedule this person, figure out this day that we're doing that, figure out what our ads are going to look like at the end of the episode, get our topics together. Like, I think and that's my biggest recommendation. I think if you're wanting to start a podcast, whether it is about something work related, whether it's a business, or whether it's just for fun, is to have some kind of flow to your show.
Yes, right.
If it's just rambling for 2 hours, and granted, maybe sometimes some of what we do sounds like that, especially when it's just you and me. But if you have no real structure to it, it's going to feel that way, and your listeners probably will recognize that too. I've listened to podcasts before. I've been like, oh, this is just like stream of consciousness for a while,
right? Versus
the ones where I feel like, oh, there was a goal in mind. They had some talking points they really wanted to talk about.
Yep.
I recurring segments were important to me from the beginning because I feel like it's something on the best podcasts I listen to. There's almost always some kind of there's always some kind of recurring segments you can expect every episode that kind of ties it together or just gives you something fun like our Tech Connecting section. So I think that's a big part of it. And then just also the other part is kind of what I just mentioned earlier, like make sure that you're working with people that are just as excited and passionate about what you're doing as you are.
Bingo. Yeah.
Like if you are excited about doing a podcast and you're other people aren't, find people that are, because it will be so much smoother and easier and more exciting when you've got other people with you that
100%
genuinely enjoy doing it.
100% agree. And that would be the next shout out goes to John Martin for being a part of this. Come on now.
Thanks.
There is nobody better, I don't think, in the channel that doing a podcast, arranging it, the process, everything like that, dude. Yeah, you got it down. But that is
big praise. I appreciate that.
It is so important though, because I think that draws a professional type of podcast that our listeners that it will continue to build will appreciate there. And I'll also tap on the only thing that you didn't touch on that I had on my list would be recommend is the content. Spend some time thinking about what your listeners want to hear about, what you guys are good at talking about, what you would have an opinion about, those types of things. Content's important. Yeah. And that's one of the things I think I know we're going to scrum, maybe later about 2021 and how we can do different things. But anyway, content's always important, right? The topics.
I completely agree. And that's kind of goes back to also the guests that you bring on too, which,
right.
There's plenty of successful podcasts where it's just a couple of people talking. Mm-hmm. I do always think two people are important.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I've ever heard a podcast that was just one person the entire time.
No, you need somebody to play off of. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So you need to have that other person. And if it's just going to be the two of you, you have to have that great relationship to have that back and forth conversation to be able to hold it up. But especially I think in the business world, if you're doing a business podcast, anytime that you can grab people from your world to come in and talk and share their insight and share different points of view is brilliant. There's no reason not to do that if you can do that.
Yeah. So, I think we touched on the things that I would recommend. The other thing, though, was interesting as I thought about that. When we looked back at the notes, it was interesting to see which one of our episodes, came out a little bit above some of the other ones.
Right.
Were you interested in that?
I was, yes.
I mean, cannabis obviously was one that was a hot topic.
Yes.
Interesting. We knew kind of going into it would be a hot topic. Man, it was a really hot topic. Yeah. It was really well played. Maybe a little bit on the sense that Dwayne was really good at promoting it.
Right.
Digital transformation in healthcare was another one.
That was one of our early ones.
One of the early ones, really well. That's right. And obviously a lot of people were interested in what's going on in healthcare and how is this pandemic affecting it. And then finally, contactless payments. That was another good,
which was fairly recent one.
Which was fairly recent one.
And again, the one that I feel like the folks we had with us, helped us go out and promote that. So I guess there's another recommendation for you if you're starting a podcast. Work with people that are going to be excited about talking about your podcast.
Yeah, no doubt.
So like if you have a guest on,
make
sure it's somebody that, and granted, we do that whenever we do a podcast. Like we always send it out to the people that joined us and tell them, hey, this is coming. We're promoting it here. Please, share and promote yourself. And and I think when you do find those folks that will do that and actively get out and push it out on their social networks, it's exactly. The messages get amplified more. It draws more eyes in, more people that even if they just watch that one episode, you never know when if 10 people watch one episode, one person might decide, hey, hit subscribe. I want to check this out. This is something I'm going to listen to more in the future.
Yep.
And I think maybe that's where it leads me to maybe one other recommendation I have, which is don't expect to be a giant successful podcast overnight.
Well, no. I mean,
any creative
numbers
endeavor
have to be realistic.
Right.
I mean, I think the average podcast has somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 200, concurrent or loyal, shall I say, podcast listeners. And so, it's not unless you feel like you're going to be Joe Rogan, I guess, who's going to have
you're not, trust
a
me.
million followers. I think you'd have to do some crazy stuff in order to get there.
Well, and I mean, how long has Joe Rogan's show been on, too?
Yeah.
I mean, usually the the most successful podcasts that have thousands and thousands and millions of listeners are the ones that have either been at it for a long time or are part of a network and a marketing, machine that whenever a new podcast comes out, like, bam, everybody's watching. Like NPR has gotten really good at they've got a whole podcast network.
Yeah, but
so basically, if NPR puts a new one out, when there's a new one out, they know they have a built-in audience that will come check it out from the beginning regardless.
Well, then here's my recommendation. Don't worry about the audience size because, the goal of the podcast is to have a conversation, to transfer knowledge, to educate, for some thought leadership amongst, a group of people and listeners. You'll have followers that'll be loyal, and it's about the information that you're conveying and stuff like that. It's not about how many people, because honestly, I don't know that the whole world's interested about our channel.
No, they're not.
But the people that are in our channel are very interested about what's going on in this world and how they can grow their business and thrive and survive and all those kinds of things. So the quality is much higher, whereas the quantity might not be there.
Yeah.
So wait a minute, maybe the quality of our listeners is better than Joe Rogan, although he's got millions of listeners.
That's right.
Was that a bold claim? That's a bold claim.
It was maybe a little on the bold side, But who's gonna substantiate it? I mean,
exactly.
It's not like Joe Rogan's gonna come in here and and show us like 20 of a couple hundred of his listeners. That
My
are,
quality
better.
of listeners are better. Yeah.
Exactly. So.
All right. So what are we gonna do differently?
Is there anything we would have done differently? From the beginning.
Well, I don't know. You got an answer to that? I mean, I can think of some things now, like one of the
times I wrote a question and didn't bother thinking of an answer.
One of the things that I, in hindsight, I do like. I think we only brought a reseller on once so far this year, and I think we should do more of that.
Right, I agree with
because I think we had great subject matter experts, no doubt about it. But when it was our episode on the modern DC. I think, which got really good viewership. But
we had one for the cannabis episode too.
Oh, all right, good point. So we did have two resellers on. So I think that's one thing, just in my mind, that if we do it differently, bringing on some more folks, resellers, because again, I used to be a reseller. I know I keep saying that, but resellers learn from resellers, and there's just good transformation of information that happens there. Yeah. So anyway, that's one differently thing. But I don't know. What about? Yeah, can you think of anything?
Nothing
Did that spark anything for you?
It really didn't. Like I said, it was one of those questions I wrote down thinking, like, do we have something for this? But
how about this? I'm going to throw another one at you then. Do you think the podcast should bring in hired guns? Like hired people to try to get, you know what I mean, to try to get either their viewership or make them feel like they're quantifying themselves or justifying themselves, that they can bring in and literally pay somebody to be on their podcast, which we haven't done.
I don't know that I'm a fan of that.
It kind of feels like buying a Twitter audience, right? Or something like that. It's just like, do you need to do that? I
mean, I guess like you could do it and it works, but like, here's the thing though, like if someone comes and listens to that one show just because they want to hear that one person and that person's able to promote it, that doesn't mean they're going to stick around for everything else. Right. I mean, maybe they do, but, it could be it's just a one-off thing. You don't have to subscribe, to listen to one episode. But we want you to subscribe, just so you know. But I'm just saying,
so if we bring on George Lucas just to get the audience.
Well, I mean, we would do that just because it's fun.
That's right. Yeah.
For our sake. I don't know.
We can't afford him, but anyway.
Let me put it this way. I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to it, if we had somebody that was going to but here's the thing. To me, it's more about if it's someone that is going to meaningfully contribute to your show and to what you're trying to do and to what you have to offer to your audience by getting them on, go for it. If you got to pay a little money to do it.
Fair enough.
If you're doing it strictly
for the
audience, you're doing it for the wrong reason.
Not a good idea.
Because if you don't have a podcast that can, grow that kind of audience and build it on your own as it is and keep them there, then what's the point? Because again, that spike, maybe it gets you a little more attention, bumps you up the rankings or whatever in Apple Podcasts or whatever, and, maybe someone finds you a little more organically in the future, but I don't know.
Yeah.
There's probably other podcasters that would tell you, yes, do it in a heartbeat, but I'm not sure. I'm kind of indifferent to it. Now, maybe we do it sometime and it works like gangbusters and suddenly we've got the podcast and, we are the number one podcast in the IT reseller channel.
I'm with you.
Of all five of us?
I think you're the reason for doing it has to be justified. Right. Yeah, because I do think, it certainly is in our purview. If there is the right person that we should have them on this podcast, but we have to pay for them to be here. If it's right for the audience, that's not a bad decision.
Yeah, if you told me that I could have someone like really speak to something that is so relevant and so important to our audience that people were going to want to hear about, and they're the absolute ideal person. They said, "Hey, I need a couple $100 or a couple grand or something to come do this that day. Sure.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
And so there's a good segue, if I could, real quick, to not just what we might do differently in 2021, but what the audience needs to do differently.
Yeah.
So here's my challenge: we need more feedback.
Yes,
right where
do.
you were just at. To our loyal listeners, and thank you so very much. Drop us a line. Tweet us. Give us some ideas about where, if you want us to bring on somebody and hire somebody, we will do it. If it makes sense to our audience. But that's what we should work on differently as a group here. For those that are listening to us, just chat us up.
And also, like, if you do like the podcast, and even if it's just a single episode you found useful, share it with somebody.
Yeah.
And and especially in the reseller world, this was something I was fond of when I was in sales. Is I learned that if I came across an interesting article or an interesting piece of information that I thought one of my customers might be interested in, didn't have to have anything to do with me trying to sell them something that day.
You just shared it.
It's about being, someone that someone feels they can rely on, that's trusted, that understands their industry, understands their problems. I would share that with them. Hey, I was just reading this article about, what's going on in publishing around, digital ebooks or whatever. When I was working my publishing days, fascinating article. Thought you might want to see it. It sounds a lot like something we talked about. Send it over to them.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to end with like, by the way, you want to schedule a time to talk about blah, blah, blah solutions? No. You just send it to them and say, thought you might be interested in this.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised how often that opens up a conversation and someone engages with you. And maybe you don't get anything out of it in that conversation, monetary wise, but, it could be very well that's just something that person thinks, man, I like working with them because they're just a cool person to talk to and have some interesting ideas, regardless of whether, I'm buying something from them or not.
Yeah.
So don't hesitate. If you listen to one of these, say you're listening to Digital Signage 101, you're like, man, this is pretty cool. I've got some customers that aren't sure they want to invest in this. I'm going to send them this podcast.
Yep.
I'm going to have them listen to this and say, hey, I was listening to these guys. They have a great breakdown of, how to start using digital signage,
how to get into it. Yeah, right.
How beneficial it can be. I thought you might want to check this out.
Yeah.
Granted, we talk a lot to our resellers about how they can make money, but doesn't mean there's not nuggets in there that someone else could find useful too.
Fair enough. So that's my challenge for 2021.
I completely agree.
Get some fan engagement going on.
If you thought you were getting off the hook, dear listeners, you're not.
You are complicit in this.
Yes.
That's right.
If you're watching, you are now part of this podcast.
So that's the 2021 challenge. But what are some predictions there, my friend? Where's this crazy world going to go in 2021?
I don't know. Like, this is another one of those things I wrote down. I'm like, do I have any predictions? Like, because I feel like we've kind of touched on a lot of this stuff. I mean, I think we know by now, and especially just in the last couple of weeks, there's been some really good, hopeful news about vaccines.
Yes.
We've got a couple that are out there that have a high efficiency rate, a high effectiveness rate, that it seems expected that, people are going to be able to start getting vaccinated as early as, end of this year, beginning of next year. Now, granted, we all know by now, like, they keep strongly telling us, everybody's not going to get there. Everybody that wants one is not going to get there for some time.
But there's hope. There's light at the end of the tunnel.
Exactly. But exactly. That's, I think, the bigger point is right now is to recognize that, like, when we started this thing months ago, it was very much we do not know how long this whole thing is going to last.
No clue.
I think we were optimistic at first, like, this is just going to be a little bit of time until we get this under control. Yeah. And then we realized it's not that simple. Now there's no end in sight. To now we're getting to the point where, like, there is an end in sight, but it is going to require some time and patience.
Yep.
And unfortunately, a lot more of what we've already been doing for a lot longer time before we get to where we feel comfortable again.
Yeah.
And to your point, there's a lot of things that still may not be as they were for years.
Yeah, and that's the prediction there, and the concern, I guess, coming out of this is again, I'll just read it. It's the significant tale of mental health needs. You can't go through an economic downturn like we did, and some of the social changes that we're going through here in the U.S. and a pandemic, and not have some kind of remaining mental health, considerations, whether it's depression, whether it's isolation for older adults, whether it's PTSD. Again, I'm not a psychotherapist or anything like that, but I can definitely see this having lasting effects there, moving not just into next year, but beyond. So,
well, I hear from people that, like, obviously, we're married. We've got children, we've got people in our lives to be with, when we're stuck inside, we're stuck with this,
Right.
And granted, for some people, maybe that's not a great thing always either. Like, you want to get away from people from time to time. Maybe, maybe you do get actually tired of your family after a while. Right. I'm not saying I do. I very much love spending time with my family. But, there is people that I know that are single and like have to live by themselves, and we're not even like where we are. I feel like is even less of it's not that it's not a concern, but like, I really feel bad for like someone who lived in New York or LA, like the hotbeds of this earlier in the year, where it genuinely was something to be feared to just go out and about. Like, like you went out for a walk your pet or something or whatever, but you could not be trusted or trust to go just anywhere and just hang out with any other people at all, and feel comfortable about that. And you're right. There's a lot of people, I think, that in that situation, a lot of single people of varying ages that had to sit at home, ingest tons of information, that was a lot of doom and gloom for a very long time. And you're right. I think it's going to weigh on a lot of people. And, in general, I feel like there is a mental health crisis before there was a pandemic that needs to be addressed and isn't addressed as much as it should be. Is stigmatized sometimes. Yep. And it's only going to be exacaberted by what's happened over the last year.
Well, and so we need to continue to help each other, right?
We do.
That's the only way a society moves forward, is that you can't, don't wait for somebody else to answer some of these problems. Sometimes you have to get into the livelihoods of those that are around you and help out. And I think that we'll be stronger for it coming out of it. But when you think about what our society has been through in the past, not just, future past pandemics, but wars that are, like World War II. I think back to that generation, what they had to go through, the struggles that they had to go through, and just everybody rallying around and things like that. The human spirit's there, and we will continue to endeavor on.
That's right.
Yeah.
Look at that positivity there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any resolutions? Are you a resolution guy?
I'm not a resolution guy.
I'm not really either.
Yeah, sorry about that. No, I mean, okay. So maybe when I see the ball drop, I'll think, yeah, but here's the bad part about me personally. My short-term memory is like the worst. And you'd ask anybody in my family, my wife at the top of the list, Dean's short-term memory is terrible. So I will literally probably forget it that night when I resolved to do. Oh, I'm going to whatever. I'm going to be a better person. I'm going to whatever it was I would resolve to do, I will forget about it. Now, that's not to say that if I don't get into something, whatever, I'll be all in and that. But yeah, resolution's not really me.
Yeah, I've never been a big fan of them either. Like, if the only thing I was thinking earlier was I want to get back into reading and writing more.
Okay.
And reading especially, like, it's funny because you heard so many people talk about like, hey, it's pandemic time, we're all locked down, we're gonna watch all the shows and read all the books. Which I guess if you don't work a 40-hour-week job, like if you were unfortunate enough to have lost your job or, simply can't do the kind of work you were doing before and are, have to stay at home and you're, comfortable enough doing that, and in a good position where it's not something to be, stressing about necessarily. Like that would have been great, but yeah, like I, didn't have that time, and I didn't get a chance to read more. So I feel like my reading really fell off the charts this year. Like
counterintuitive, you would thought,
yeah, exactly. More time. I have not been reading nearly as much as usual, so I'm hoping I can get back to that a little bit more next year. I'm always on there's an app called Goodreads, like it's a community for readers or whatever, and they always have a challenge every year. You set a challenge of how many books you're going to read, and I think I set mine at like 15 for this year, and I've still got like 5 to go, so it's probably not going to happen unless I do some really short, quick stuff. Yeah. But, I want to set myself a challenge next year and meet it. And then the writing part of things is not just for work, although, I mentioned earlier, like I haven't been able to write as much the stuff I like to write for us, but just personal writing. I want to start doing a little bit more of that next year. But,
good for you.
But I'm not going to call those resolutions because that implies like, if I fail, like I have to beat myself up and be down on myself, like just recognizing like this is the stuff I want to try to do more of. I'm going to make a conscious effort to do more of it. But if it doesn't happen, I'm not going to beat myself up at it either.
Yeah, I'm with you. So, and that's where I guess like these annual resolutions, I'm not into that. I'm more into like daily resolutions. Yeah. I mean, here's what I'm going to try to accomplish. And that
Today I'm going to get out of bed.
It's a smaller chunk that to me seems more manageable than this year I'm going to whatever. I'm going to be an accountant or I'm going to
climb Everest.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, maybe I'll get there someday. I don't know.
Yeah, good luck. All right. I think that does it for us for like the year in review.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Have we kind of put most of 2020 to bed?
I hope so. Yeah.
A month and a half early. Talking about putting the cart before the horse here.
Well, and everybody talks about it between Thanksgiving and the holidays. It's usually always kind of a coast period, where businesses are just kind of maintaining, keeping the lights on, stuff like that. Well, around here it's not been, but I think this year more than ever, it will be a coasting. Like oh my gosh, like just whatever we can do to get to the end of the year. And I don't want to build up the end of the year because it's just a day. We're gonna wake up on January 1st and we're still gonna be in a pandemic. We're still gonna all these things are still gonna be.
I wish it was that awesome. Wouldn't it be awesome if you turn that calendar like, we're done.
There you go.
That sucked. We're done.
See, the picture on the calendar is different.
Yeah, so, exactly. look, this guy in this picture is happy. He's not worried about a pandemic. He didn't lose his job. He's not struggling to get by. He's good. Yeah.
He's not an employee, a teacher, or a bartender, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
The person doing
out there
everything
every day, putting his life on the line. No, he's good.
If
only.
If only. But it'll be like a mental note. It'll be like a milestone, right? We made it through 2020.
Exactly.
We made it through. 2021 cannot be any worse.
I mean, let's be honest. This is going to be the year that when we are old fogies, we're going to be telling grandchildren about I lived through 2020.
Yeah. My 9-year-old daughter is going to get on that bandwagon too. Well, when I was 9, I went through the impact on her life has been pretty minimal, but
I wonder what stuff we're going to exaggerate. Like, like our grandparents exaggerated about stuff like, I had to walk, uphill both ways in the snow to school,
Right.
And I wonder what kind of stuff we're going to be like, I had to, I couldn't get toilet paper for a week,
Well, that's not stretching the truth, though.
That's true. That's a good point.
You got to come up with stretching like something like this.
I had to use newspapers.
I had to pickle pig's feet to live. That would be a little bit of a stretch, maybe.
Right.
You can use that one, by the way, in 20 years. Yeah,
I will.
Oh, no, we had to pickle pig's feet in order just to survive.
That's right. All right. Well, we are going to put this stuff aside. We are going to talk a little bit more about 2020 in a moment, but the fun stuff of 2020 in a moment. But in the meantime, as always, again, I want to thank our founding members. Could not do this show without you. Thank you so much for your support this year. And hopefully next year, we don't have any plans to stop doing this. I don't, at least. If I'm doing it by myself in here, I'll still do it.
The bill's in the mail, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. The bill's in the mail. But we do want to hear from you. As Dean mentioned earlier, we want your feedback. We want your insight. We want to know what topics you're interested in, what you would like us to talk about, what you would like to do, kind of guests maybe you'd like to hear on the show. So please reach out to us. You can find us on Twitter at TEConnectPod. You can email us TEConnect@BlueStarInc.com. All right, well, we are going to wrap things up with a kind of a special version of What's TEConnecting with You. It's all been fun stuff here at the end of the year to wrap up. So I wanted to, this is one of those things where I'm going to talk about how nerdy I am.
Okay.
I really haven't done this much the last couple of years.
That's okay. The Band-Aid's been ripped off. Everybody understands it.
We already have the Star Wars episode at this point.
Exactly.
So I'm a big fan of lists. Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan of making lists.
Okay.
Like of my top this, top that, stuff like that.
Okay, fair enough.
Sucker for that stuff.
Sucker for it, yeah.
Well, every year, now granted, I have not done that yet for this year, but for a long time, I would always make a list of like my top 10 movies, top 10 TV. I think I'm just going to throw movies out this year because
did anything come out?
All like 3 new movies I may have seen this year, and whatever. And like top music of the year. Now, I also am a big fan of, I always make a playlist of my favorite music every year.
Wow.
Back in the day, I used to burn it to CD. I used to burn it to tapes originally.
Yeah.
Or, record it on a tape. Yeah. Burn it to CDs for a long time.
Oh, you were talking about that.
And I would hand them out. I would give them out to all my friends.
Or whatever.
Christmas gifts, send them Christmas cards. I still make playlists on Apple, Apple Music now.
I need to follow you.
I will gladly share that stuff with you. But I wanted to talk about like some of our favorite stuff this year, like some of the things that like not work related, not pandemic related, like some of the things that brought us some joy this year. So whether it's movies, TV shows, podcasts, books, like what are some of your favorite things from this year that you want people to know about that we haven't talked about?
I am going to go to movies.
Okay.
I'll start there because one movie that hit our house, which was released earlier, it didn't come out this year, but it was Hamilton. Hamilton have you seen it?
Yes.
Okay.
Love it.
I totally love that. And now I want to go see the play, real for real. But I don't know what my expectations were going into it. There's a lot of hype around it, and I didn't really know the premise of it or anything like that. But it just immediately grabs you and brings you in. What a fantastic play, show, music. I mean, the whole thing. And I'm not into rap and that kind of stuff, but it pulled it off really well.
Yeah.
I'm a little worried about somebody like my mom being able to connect to it, because I just think, there's a lot of riffing that's going on and stuff like that.
Very fast paced.
Very fast paced. Yeah.
You really got to keep up. Yeah.
You do. But man, I was pleasantly surprised, and my youngest daughter, Cordy, just loves it. And so for like it's had a lot of legs in our house, as far as, how it goes.
Right.
When you got kids in the house, something will become a fad inside of your house.
You want to watch it every day for a month.
And sometimes they last a week. Right. Sometimes they last a month or so. But this one's lasted a while, like months. And it's like we still, the king is my favorite character. So, of course, I'm the one going around,
Do you feel bad that sometimes, like, the guy that you like most are like, this guy is so much fun to watch, is the white dude?
Right. Well, in this particular case, yes. Yeah.
But he is. You're right. Jonathan Groff, who is funny because...
and he just nails it.
It's funny because that guy I've seen in other stuff. Like, he's on a series called Mindhunter that was on Netflix about, like one of the guys that first, like, started tracking down serial killers in the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I was used to seeing him in, like, serious roles and had no idea that he had this musical background. I think he was even on Glee, apparently, in the later years or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. As soon as he comes out, I was like, oh, this guy's fun. Like,
yeah.
This awful version of King George is awesome.
So
sorry, I didn't interrupt you there.
No, well, it's not an awful. Well, I mean, his portrayal is just. Well, he just nails it. If you ask
it's honest.
me.
It's an honest portrayal.
It's just hysterical. Yeah. And so anyway, but no, that's the one movie that I guess that's been really kind of connecting to us in our world. Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple series, I guess the good news would be I wasn't really into Netflix. We had Netflix, but the kids were usually the ones on that. But top of the list would be Mandalorian. Looking forward to that and consuming that. The Haunting of Hill House. Were you aware of this one?
Have you watched Bly Manor, the new one yet?
No, haven't gotten to that yet, but that's on the list. During the holidays, we'll probably hit that one. That was a good one. Just a little bit on the edge there, a little bit enough to creep you out. A couple jump scares every now and then, but just I'm really impressed by the production value of what Netflix has put, and we're primarily Netflix. I watched a couple things maybe on Prime, Amazon Prime, but really mostly Netflix. Man, really good stuff. Really highly produced, well written.
Yeah.
It's not garbage that they're putting out. They're putting out really good stuff.
You would, because I think that was always a perception for a while, is like streaming services, like, hey, they're there to put out. They're there to put your seasons of Friends out or whatever, so you can watch the old stuff that you love. And then when the kind of shift started happening to original content, I think people at first were kind of like,
it's going to be popcorn stuff. It's not going to be very good.
But Netflix came out of the gate with like House of Cards, Orange is the New Black, like all these like prestige, high production value, strong shows that were like Emmy contenders.
Yeah,
that got a lot of buzz. Like they knew what they were doing out of the gate with that. And I think it's funny that if you look at it, Netflix's model is mostly about their own content now. Like they've, I think I wouldn't be surprised if in another decade Netflix does not even stream any outside stuff anymore. It's just
their stuff,
their own stuff. Yeah,
could very well be.
And that's to credit to them because just like they saw the writing on the wall and were innovative about, hey, we're going to do this DVD service thing, but in reality, where we want to go, I love the story of Netflix. The idea of like, hey, we want to get to be a streaming service that people can watch stuff on demand, but we realize we're not there yet, so we're just going to be an on-demand DVD service for a while.
Yeah, brilliant.
And then when the technology caught up where they could do that,
everybody's trying to catch up with them.
Yeah, exactly.
Disney, CBS, and all of them trying to catch up with them.
Now, granted, you could get into the conversation about overload there, but
definitely. And look what you've created now. we got to have all these subscriptions.
Yeah, exactly. But to get back to Hill House, kind of what you mentioned there, the idea that like it's a horror show in the lightest sense possible.
Yes,
like my wife is not a horror person. Like she will watch
that.
Super scary movies, but she enjoyed that. Granted, there's times that she watched it with her iPad in front of her face.
Okay.
But she would still watch that. And the new one, actually, the new one's not even as scary even as that. Like there's even less like scary stuff in the newer season. So good stuff. Yeah.
And then the last thing, I guess, that when I think about one of my favorite things that's happened this year, and it's I guess people getting back to biking. So I used to bike to work all the time. I have a bike. I don't ride it as much as I'd like to, but I love the fact that people are getting on bikes and getting out there and being a part of that. And just because to me it just means people are getting out. They're using that as a mode of transportation. A little geeky, I guess, in that sense. But man, I love that. I love what's happening, or what that says about our society, and the fact that it's really hard to find a bike.
They had a shortage for a while.
There's a shortage out there. Yeah, it's hard to find them. And if you are a bike store owner, man, business can't be better than it is right now.
It is always interesting. I think we've talked about this before. I always find it fascinating, like what businesses thrive during challenging times for other people. And I feel like sometimes you're never quite sure what that's going to be. Like you might think
right,
but then you realize something like a bike store. Would you have ever imagined
never
a
guessed
bike
that?
store?
No.
I mean, it makes complete sense.
Totally.
When you look back on it.
Yeah.
But at the beginning, you never would have thought, oh man, those bikers.
That's
those
where I'm
bike
going to
shops,
invest. Yeah,
they're gonna be tearing it up right now.
I'm waiting for the article to come out. Well, I guess the fact that bikes were going to be, when the pandemic hit this, whatever, trying to prophesize that they're the end all be all for predicting where you should be investing your money.
Right.
I invested that bike stores are going to be the number one thing in 2021. Whatever. How about you?
All right, so I got a list here. I'm not gonna go too far in depth in this stuff because I know we're running over our normal amount of time.
Well, Marco's already given us the stink eye.
Yeah, exactly. But look, if you're in it this long, you might as well stick around to the end.
Yeah.
The Mandalorian, same as you.
Yeah.
Quite pleased that's come back this year. If and just the first 3 episodes, we talked about it in our Star Wars episode that. The way that show is made, the production values, the feel of it, I genuinely feel super excited about Star Wars again because of this show.
Yeah. Thank you to those producers that are doing it right.
Very much. Jon Favreau, who probably most people know from directing the first 2 Iron Man movies, and and from being in the movie Swingers, like he has been one of the driving forces behind it, as well as Dave Filoni, who is one of the guys who did some of the animated shows, which is why there's been some connections between those.
Okay, all right.
So, all right, that one definitely. Other TV, Lovecraft Country.
Okay, I've heard about it.
This is a show on HBO, which is kind of a horror show too, but it is horror mixed with some commentary about racism in the 50s.
Okay.
And every episode kind of takes a different type of horror genre.
Oh, okay.
And
really?
Puts a spin on it. So every episode, it's all, there's an ongoing story, but every episode feels like a different genre of horror kind of. So you've got body horror, you've got ghost stories, you've got Lovecraft style horror, the terrifying, monsters from beyond type stuff. There's one episode that gets into like Korean folk tales, fascinating stuff. But what fascinates me about the show also is at the end of the day, racism is still the bigger monster than anything else you see in the entire show.
There you go. Right.
It's very timely for right now too.
Right. Yeah.
His Dark Materials just came back for a new season. As we're recording this yesterday, mid-November, by the time this episode is out, most of the new season will probably be over with, if not finished. Based on a series of books by Philip Pullman, which are kind of like fantasy, but a little bit more not adult fantasy. I think it's fine for young adult readers. It's considered as young adult, but like a step above like your Harry Potters. For instance.
Okay, gotcha.
There actually was a film called The Golden Compass that came out some years back that adapted the first book very badly. Yeah, did not quite get it right, toned down some of the darker, more controversial elements of the book. But there's been a new series. The first season was last year, was the first book. The second season that started recently is the second book, which to me is the best book of the series. I love these books. Great show. It's basically just about a girl who lives in an alternate universe where our souls are outside of our bodies in the form of animals called demons.
Okay.
So everybody's bonded with a
demon. Okay.
At birth, that is their like representation of their soul that lives outside of their body.
Okay.
And along the way, she finds out about this huge conspiracy that's going on from this very powerful organization that kind of runs our world. That is wanting to dive into other worlds, including ours. Won't spoil much more than that, but it's a very fascinating tale. I'm very excited. The first season I thought was very well done. I'm very psyched to see where the rest of this show goes.
Nicely done. Yeah.
Yes,
okay. I'm going to tune into that.
The Queen's Gambit. We're not too far into that yet. My wife and I just started watching on Netflix a new series about a girl who becomes a chess prodigy and just kind of like follows the trail of her life as she learns the ins and outs of chess and becomes a grandmaster, I believe, of some sort. Movie side. The only thing I can shout out really that was new for this year, Onward, the latest Pixar film that came out. I think there's another Pixar movie that might be out by the end of the year, but it went straight to Disney Plus. This was one where they didn't bother with the theater at all.
Yep.
They didn't try Premier Access. They went it straight to Disney Plus, or you could stream it and buy it other places.
Why have I not seen that in my household yet? I think it's honestly, my daughter's like anti-animation right now. She's going through a phase.
Is she? Like, I didn't think I would, like, it was one of those ones I was like, well, I'll give this a whirl with my son at one point. And he loved it. He was fascinated by it because it's all about magic and wizardry. And it's got a fun story about a young man who's wanting to reconnect with his father who passed away before he died or before he was born. So good stuff there. Good movie.
Yeah.
Music side, Fiona Apple's new album came out this year. She actually recorded it while she was in lockdown, so it's mostly her. Occasionally her dog's make an appearance in the background. She figured out how to use it in her music.
That's awesome.
I've always been a fan of Fiona Apple. She's always made fantastic, amazing music that I feel like gets better the more and more you listen to it, and this new album is no exception. And then on the podcast side...
Well, hold on. On the music side, the only thing we've been listening to in our house is Harry Styles because, I've got girls and daughters, and so if it's not Harry...
I promise you, I could not identify Harry Styles as a song if it came on.
Oh, well, okay, yeah.
And I think I'm okay with that.
I'm an expert. So if you ever need to know information about Harry Styles...
I am going to be interested in the day when my son gets old enough to start, making his own musical decisions and choices, like what he's going to be into. Because I've already noticed he loved the soundtrack for that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movie, which is a lot of like hip-hop, and like not normally my style of music necessarily, although I do find that...
We got to riff on that next year because I struggle with what my kids listen to, and it's like, are you listening to what they're saying? And I don't know.
But don't all parents?
Well, okay, fair enough. Yeah. But I go back and listen to the music that I was listening to when my parents were saying that to me, and it's not the language, it's not the context and content that is in what I'm hearing in a lot of that music today. So anyway, we got to riff on that. We got to unpack.
Maybe that'll be a special episode at the end of next year.
Oh man,
let's talk music.
I need to be on the couch. Somebody needs to give me some therapy because my kids, my son will listen to Rush. He'll listen to rock and roll or whatever, and they love country. So they're very diverse in their music. But it's just it's the hip hop, and it's just it's the rap that I don't understand, and some of the particular artists that they listen to, it's like, whoa, what are you listening to? Anyway. I digress.
You sound like such an old parent.
Oh, I am.
I mean, to be fair, I'm there too. I get it.
I totally am. But I'm listening to the music, so I pull it up and I'm like reading the lyrics and I'm like horrified. I'm like, what are they talking about? What is this? There's no way. I would have gotten excommunicated had I listened to that kind of music back in the day. But anyway.
Yeah, I understand.
You were going to say podcast.
Well, I've mentioned a lot of podcasts throughout our season of episodes that I've been enjoying. One in particular I will shout out that it's not necessarily brand new, but a podcast called The Greatest Discovery, which is from the makers of another podcast called The Greatest Generation, which is not about World War II veterans.
All right, fair enough.
That World War II generation. It is, as they describe themselves, a couple of guys that are a little bit embarrassed to have a podcast about Star Trek.
Okay, fair enough.
And this was actually one of the first podcasts I really started listening to back when I started listening to podcasts like maybe 4 or 5 years ago at my last job when I had to do some traveling. And I at the time, I think I finally figured out how to listen to podcasts in my car or something. And so I started with the standards like This American Life and Serial, the stuff everybody listens to anyway. But this was one of the first random podcasts that I found from some article or whatever that talked about, hey, these guys and I think it was very early on, they'd only had a few episodes in. These guys are watching every single episode of Star Trek The Next Generation and doing a review of each one. Like each one, they just get together and talk about the episode together. And it's mostly comedic. Like, they take a comedic angle. Like they're clearly two guys who love the content. They love Star Trek and they're huge fans.
Right.
But they also acknowledge man, there's a lot of stuff you can make fun of in Star Trek too. So they have a lot of fun with it. And it's turned into this enterprise for them. They're very these guys are kind of like heroes to me in the podcast world because they have turned this into their job.
Oh,
they went from being I think both of them were directors and filmmakers or whatever, on the side who did a lot of gig work here and there. And then they started making this podcast. It has grown. They got themselves onto a network. They've got thousands, probably tens of thousands of listeners. Maybe even hundreds of thousands by this point. And people that are excited about them. They've moved from The Next Generation over to Deep Space Nine. They're almost done with that. But now there's all this new Star Trek shows that are coming out. So they started another podcast.
It's like endless content.
Right.
Yeah.
And they basically are this is our life now. They have a third podcast about war movies they do with another guy too. But they have 2 podcasts all about Star Trek where they're always reviewing Star Trek shows. It's still, even after all these years, so much fun. This year ramped up even more than ever because CBS All Access debuted 2 new Star Trek series over the year, Picard and Lower Decks, new season of Discovery, and its 3rd season now. And they're just doing all of it. They're having a blast doing it.
That's awesome.
They are very much people that I have a lot of respect for.
Yeah.
It's so much fun listening to that show. And they've got an amazing community built around it. Like we call ourselves the Friends of DeSoto. I'm not even going to explain that, but like we're just this huge community around Star Trek and all these fans that just love to come together and talk about it. And so kudos to those guys for making a great fun podcast.
Oh, absolutely. And way to hit on a niche. I mean, that's what it's all about. Yeah.
So that's the dream right there. You know, I don't know the TEConnect podcast will quite be that big.
No,
but,
right. Well, we'll see.
But maybe we can branch out.
There you go.
All right. Well, we have gone on for way too long. Hopefully, if you listened all the way to the end, you appreciated all of our ramblings about 2020. I am ready to be done with 2020. As far as this podcast is concerned, we are done.
We're done. There we go.
This is going to be our last episode of
on
the
to
year.
Bigger and better things.
Right. We will be back in 2021. I don't know exactly when yet. We got to, as Dean mentioned, figure out some things. Find out what we're going to do next. We promise we'll be back. Though. We're not going to leave you hanging. I promise you that.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, hey, if you haven't listened to all the episodes, go back, find some previous episodes you like, share them with some friends, and again, reach out to us and let us know if there's anything that you want to hear more about. So until next time, stay connected. Thank you so much for listening this year.
The TEConnect podcast is brought to you by ELO. Built with versatility in mind, ELO Edge Connect offers a wide assortment of peripheral options for your digital display. Whether for endless aisle, self-order, or collaboration, you can seamlessly attach up to 4 peripherals to the touchscreen Edge with flexibility to add, remove, or change later as needed. Options include barcode scanners, EMV cradle, customer-facing display, webcam, and more. To learn more, visit ELO's microsite on BlueStarInc.com or contact your BlueStar account manager.
Productivity is the name of the game in mobile devices, so Honeywell's CT40XP is the one-stop productivity solution for store associates and mobile workers. The device seamlessly accomplishes daily workflows from inventory lookup and in-store merchandising to last-mile delivery. Built on Honeywell's Mobility Edge platform, the CT40XP's common software ecosystem strengthens its security, accelerates multiple deployments, and extends its lifecycle. With a 10-meter accurate flex range imager, displaced device finder, and rugged packaging and protection, it's a reliable, secure device for years of daily performance. To learn more, contact your BlueStar Honeywell representative. Providing the right care to the right patient at the right time is crucial. By connecting patient data, clinicians, and providers in real time using Zebra's healthcare technology solutions, providers can consistently deliver a higher level of care with fewer medical errors. With Zebra's purpose-built solutions, you can ensure easy access to critical patient data through seamless integration and device management. The strength of the Zebra healthcare portfolio helps maximize clinical operational efficiency and patient safety in critical areas like positive patient identification, clinical mobility and collaboration, and with supply chain and inventory management activity. Looking to improve accuracy, clinical staff productivity, and patient safety? Go with Zebra Healthcare.